Hello, if you want to watch exclusive lemon content on What If Naruto, then go to my Boosty. The first link in the description here contains such hot stories for adults, such as What If Naruto was a daddy for Sarada, or Kushina and Mikoto Vulgar Naruto mommies. Follow the link and enjoy. I'm waiting for you.
Power quickly faded in the face of such opponents. Still, they had done some damage to the opposing side. There were now only 5 ninja, but they were on a whole other level. More than enough to deal with a weakened Team 7 and a beat. Nino Shikacho. Naruto spat out a glob of blood, swearing under his breath. Sasuke was injured as it was. Shikamaru was out of chakra for his jutsu. Chuji was barely standing, and Ino was no different. Sakura had passed out, though if it was from exhaustion and injuries or sheer weakness, he didn't know. Damn. If only I was stronger. I can't be the Hokage if I'm dead, and I refuse to use his power. But do I have a choice? Naruto, though desperately, he wasn't expecting to get an answer. There is always a choice, but to make it thou needs voice. Power lurks in your body and soul, more than enough to reach thine goal. Yet here you stand. You hesitate. Now tell me, boy, why do you wait? Nar looked around frantically, trying to locate the voice. He would have pinned the voice on the fox, but he had heard the thing speak before, and this new voice sounded much older, much more powerful, and possibly darker. I refuse to use his power to fight my battles. I don't want to be anything like that fox. Now who are you? Show yourself. The voice only seemed amused by the boy's nervousness. 10,000 years I have slept, and in the oblivion my power kept. Something about thee woke me up, kid. Listen to my proposition, and a fox I may rid. Naruto's eyes widened as the world slowed to a crawl before stopping completely. He mentally nodded to the voice. If it could get rid of the fox, it might be worth listening to. My name is Blood, the Lord of Hell. Power you'll get if you listen well. I need a body to see the sage. Along with my company comes the advice of a sage. I'll rid you of the fox and give you my might, young child. In return for you to house my soul and power, chaotic and wild. Lord of Hell, Naruto just about shouted. He could see the advantages, but he knew too little to jump in head first. What's the catch? Going to steal my soul or something? Blood seemed genuinely amused, and soon a barking laughter rang out throughout the forest. A figure cloaked in a shifting black cloak of shadows appeared before Nar, towering over him at least 8 feet tall. Red eyes stared back from beneath the hood. You shall lose your right to call yourself human first. Then your powers will grow till ready to burst. A third demon, third dragon, third archon as well. Righteous or not, you'll have the powers of hell. In your future, I do see you becoming what you truly want to be. Demon or not, you shall have your soul. Okage and love would be achievable goals. Just know this darkness can make a better shield than a sword to wield. So, in return for my human side, I'll gain the power to reach my goals and protect my precious people. Naruto asked, slowly riddling out the ancients' words. Blood nodded, but raised a clawed hand that seemed to be coated in a thin layer of blood-red fur. I wish to see the age, that is all. What is done with my power, I couldn't care less at all. Murder and destroy, protect and save, or live alone in the forest within a cave. But I will help you in whatever path, and it is you who will decide who faces your wrath. Nar paused, thinking over the offer. He wanted to take the offer, but he had to do one thing first. The one thing he was grateful to the QB for was the one set of useful information he had told him in one of his rants. Demons cannot break promises. Dragons refused to break pacts, and archons couldn't lie. Is that absolutely everything? Is there any reason you could take control of me? Don't lie to me, Archon. "Tell me everything," he shouted. Blood grinned, showing sharp white teeth. "Simply put, I'll take the Q.B's place. And to accommodate my power, change your race. If you find yourself in a bind, I'll save you by controlling you. Any more is prevented by the contract signed. There will be some physical changes here and there, but they shouldn't be big enough for you to care." Blood pulled a contract from his cloak and unrolled it, handing it to Nar to read. Nar hesitantly took it and steeled himself, getting ready to look for anything the contract might let Blood do to him. Contract: a vessel. Naruto Uzumaki, carrier of the Cubits, hereby agrees to be the vessel of Blood, the Lord of Hell. The QB, being a demon, will be absorbed by Blood to rid Nar of it and bolster the power they share. All of Blood's powers will be sent through the seal formerly used to bind the QB, in order to filter them to a level that isn't fatal to Nar. The powers will change Nar into a form more suited to using such demonic, draconic, and archonic powers. Nar may change this form as he wishes, as much as desired. Blood shall not have any control of the body unless Nar is in a truly life-threatening situation that is clearly beyond his abilities, and shall retain control until Naruto is safe for 3 days, whichever is less. There will be a mental link established, and any attempt at corruption of the vessel shall result in excruciating agony. Blood is permitted to give advice and his own opinions on subjects, wanted or not, and will see out of Naruto's eyes. Unless this is an inconvenience, at which point a clone can be made, and Blood's mind can be put into that will last for 29 hours before dissipating and returning him to the vessel. Blood may also manifest himself in a spiritual manner, having no true physical body, but able to interact with his environments to the same level that Nar may, though he may not interfere with anything that Nar hasn't given express permission to do, as a show of good faith that he has not been on corruption of the host. Blood offers a demonic summoning technique which will be turned into a summoning scroll upon the signing of this contract, and the ability to summon Castle Hell Cry when Blood deems ready. In return, Naruto Uzumaki must at some point in his highly elongated life see most of the world, and if possible hell. He must also master his abilities to a sufficient degree. This contract may be altered with the willing consent of both signers. Below that was a place to sign. Blood's name was already on it, written in red ink that looked incredibly like blood. Ironically, Nar gazed over the contract, noticing it was hastily written, but it was binding, and it didn't allow Blood to do anything bad, as long as he saw the world. Nar looked at one of the spikes near the top of the contract and, acting on impulse, pricked his finger before pressing it to the blank space, watching in detached fascination as his blood turned into his name. The contract disappeared along with Blood, but his voice echoed throughout the clearing. "Thank you. Now I can stop that damned rhyming routine. Anyway, as you can imagine, I can't simply just jump into the seal without killing you. It'll take about a week for it to finish, but seeing as you're in the middle of a fight, I'll give you enough to destroy these fools. Oh, and by the way, kill them. Dead things don't come back to kill you nearly as much as wounded enemies. And the jumpsuit is going to. For now, I'll garb you in what I wore when I was training. Have fun, young one." His voice faded as Naruto felt lighter yet complete, like he had been freed from some sort of dire bondage. He watched as his wounds were healed by the black and red energy that was undoubtedly Blood's. After a moment, it wrapped him in a cocoon, lasting no more than a few seconds before bursting open to reveal a new Nar. As the world went back to normal, the entire clearing stared at Nar, shocked by the change he had gone through in only a Nankon to them. He smirked as he rolled his shoulders, falling into a stance on sheer instinct. He also took a moment to gaze upon what Blood had garbed him in. He had on black ninja sandals with metal plates on the front and back for extra kick damage. He also had on black cargo pants bearing red runes running up the sides and a multitude of pockets. Over his torso was a tight red tank top showing off his now well-toned torso and six-pack. Over that was a sleeveless black trench coat. On his hands were black fingerless gloves that bore small metal plates over each of his knuckles. His hair had turned blood red and now had black tips along with a few black streaks going through it. Very nice blood, thought Inar, getting a grunt in response. He could feel the ancient presence getting settled in his mind, waiting for the conclusion of the battle to evict the fox. Naruto turned his gaze to the enemy, but he spoke to his allies, noting that his voice was slightly deeper and calmer. "Rest for now, friends. I'll at least buy you time to do that. As for you," he said, motioning toward the sound ninja, "I'll give you one chance to surrender. Fail to do so, and I will show you what a true demon is capable of. If you surrender, however, you'll get to live." The sound ninja stood still for a moment, caught off guard by his words, before bursting into laughter. The one wrapped in bandages recovered first. "We have you beaten, and you tell us to surrender. What are you on?" asked Do, getting support from his teammate Saku. The third teammate stayed silent, though Jean was torn on what to do. Part of her said to fight this odd person, transformation or no. Another part told her to run like hell, and a third part told her to simply surrender. She backed up to a tree, drawing out her sunbon before laying them on the ground, kneeling soon after. Her allies took no notice, but Inar looked at her and inwardly groaned. Demons had to follow promises, and Archons couldn't lie. She would live. You may want her alive anyway. Archons were often viewed as pillars of strength and courage, and oft apprentices and followers. Demons would generally take prisoners of war as slaves. Not nearly as bad as it sounds, by the way. Dragons were torn on the matter. Not all of them enjoyed the fame and followers, but giant flying lizards attracted some serious cult worship. Regardless, there is a binding spell that I use on my servants that you could use on her. It makes it painfully difficult to disobey orders, but allows for free will. If I wanted zombie slaves, then I would have made some. Zombies. Can you show me the binding spell? That actually sounds like a good idea. She could tell me what the sound is planning. Naruto thought, a feral grin appearing on his face. Think Ailyard. Get to the tower. I'll tell you once you arrive there. The spell is simple, but it can leave you drained in her unconscious. You must come up with a mark on your own, however, as it is what creates the bond. Enough talk. Show them the might of hell. Nar started laughing in an insane manner, scaring the __ out of everyone. Naruto calmed down, but the grin remained. "Time's up! See you in hell!" he shouted, rushing forward, catching the sound ninja off guard with the sheer recklessness of the maneuver. Saku could barely utter a curse as Naruto's fist slammed into his gut, winding him. Naruto didn't stop there, continuing the assault by punching and kicking in a wild fury, finishing the flurry by throwing him into one of the other Sound Nines. The impact was harsh, but it was only made more damaging by Naruto appearing behind the two and planting a spine-shattering kick in the other knee back. The impact was insane, killing him and launching Zaku into the third knee. This one was faster though, and managed to dodge the attack, taking a defensive stance immediately after with Do following suit. Naruto grinned and picked up a small one-handed scythe that one of the Sound Nin had been using, casually dragging his tongue across the blade. He saw the slightly disturbed looks from the Sound Ninja as he licked the blood from it. In a flash, he threw a kunai he had been holding towards the Sound Ninja, and as predicted, they split up. The dumbest thing they could have done. Naruto appeared in front of the other ninja, put the so the blade was digging into the back of his neck and kicked his chest with enough strength to force the Kama through his neck. Naruto sighed himself as the head hit the dirt. Not used to his new speed just yet, before he could admire his handiwork, Naruto felt ball rise in the back of his throat as the sound waves hit him from that damn melody arm. "Now I'm going to kill you painfully," Naruto stated as he blinked out of existence using his speed again. "Where did he go?" questioned Do, before he could register the assault. A burning hot pain shot through him from his right shoulder. He looked over and almost had a heart attack from the shock. Naruto had stiffened his hand and used it as a blade to tear off Do's right arm, and with it the melody arm. Do jumped back, screaming in pain, and he kept moving back until his back was to a tree. "Saint, stay away!" he yelled, going insane from the pain and blood loss. Naruto gained that feral grin once more as he picked up the arm, holding it from the bloody shoulder. He disappeared, coming back into Do's field of vision too late. All the mummy-like Jin saw was a sadistic smirk and his severed arm mid-swing. The melody arm crushed Do's head between itself and the tree, leaving a bloody mass dripping down the tree. "That was fine. Too bad there aren't more," he said, genuinely wishing for more. The rush he had felt when he killed them was simply wonderful. The failing rush left him very aware of his surroundings, specifically Kin. He let the melody arm fall from his grip as he turned to Kin, walking towards her with a slow gait. The leaf ninja gained mortified expressions as he approached the only sound needed to have the brains to surrender. Thinking he was going to kill her in cold blood, Shikamaru tried to move to intercept him, but his legs gave out, forcing him to watch in horror from the ground. Naruto stood in front of Chin, noting that her eyes were screwed shut. She was waiting for pain. When none came, she slowly opened her eyes and looked up. What she saw was the slightly annoyed expression on Naruto's face, like she had cheated him in a game. The lack of action on his part seemed to relieve some of the tension in the air, but they waited to see if he would kill her or not. "You have no idea how lucky you were, girl," Naruto finally said, offering a hand to help Kin off the ground. The clearing went silent, the leaf ninja trying to figure out why he didn't kill her. Kin wondered if this was some sort of sick joke, but Naruto kept his hand there, a serious look in his eye. "What is this? Some kind of sick joke? Going to give me some kind of hope before you kill me? Huh? Is that it?" she yelled, almost in tears. Naruto sighed. He would have to explain this eventually, but later sounded a lot better than now. "I said, if you surrendered, you would live. You did. And as such, you get to live. Now then, get up and come with me. Unless, of course, you'd like to stay wounded in a forest full of hungry carnivores in a clearing that reeks of fresh blood," he replied, offering his hand once more. Chin looked at the hand for a moment, hesitantly took it, and was quickly lifted to her feet. He turned on his heel and strode towards his team, Chin following behind him like a lost puppy. Naruto got Sasuke and Shikamaru to their feet, having to restrain a laugh at their expressions of respect when they gazed upon him. Sasuke for his power, Shikamaru for the sheer ruthlessness that was obviously not planned. Ino seemed wary of the blonde-turned redhead, but she got her team together and left quickly. Naruto looked at their retreating figures, taking a moment before he answered Sasuke's unasked question without even turning to look at him. "Yes, I will explain it later, but I'm in no mood to do so repetitively. So wait until we reach the tower. We'll get there tomorrow, provided we hurry, and that will give us a day or so to rest, during which time I will tell everyone who needs to know. Now rest, Sasuke, you look like ___ I'll wake you and Sakura at dawn." He seemed almost detached as he spoke, almost as if he was off in his own little world for a short time. Sasuke cast another glance at his changed teammate and vowed to find out how he got such power. The girl he was very wary of. However, only moments before Naruto's transformation, she had been trying to kill them. At the same time, though, she now seemed to obey Nar like a servant would a lord. He drifted into an uneasy sleep filled with memories best left forgotten. "And so he sleeps," said Nar nonchalantly. He turned his gaze to Chin and asked a question she wasn't expecting. "Do you wish to serve me?" "What?" she sputtered out. Naruto cast her a bored glance as he rifled through the contents of the sound corpses. "When we get to the tower, everyone is expected to give a full report. It's basic tuning protocol to report on every mission." "I know. Orochimaru is connected to the sound, and as soon as I say that, they'll take you into custody and interrogate you day and night, and we have some talented interrogators. But if you serve me, then I become your guardian, and you are placed under my custody. It might not sound like much, but the Hokage is like family to me. Not much could be done to you." He paused and seemed to go off into his mind for a moment before coming back. "So what do you say? Life in a Kanaha cell or life serving as a servant to me? I really don't like the word servant, but I'm afraid there's no other way to put it. Water the plants, feed the fish, stupid, __, like that." Kin sat there silent. She was thinking about what he said, and no matter how she thought of it, he was right. If he took her as a servant, the Leaf couldn't take her for interrogation. But she would have to tell them everything she knew. The Yamanaka clan would also more than likely do a mind scan to verify the information. She didn't know too much, but it might be enough to save her. She turned her gaze to the red head that now bore a satisfied look. Having found the scroll he needed, this Naruto, as she had heard him called, was clearly strong. He completely decimated their team after that transformation. But what was it exactly? She decided not to push her luck. Her life was in his hands. "Okay," she said nervously, trying to force the images of carnage that he seemed to inspired out of her mind. She really didn't like her teammates, but their dispatching was just violent. Her eyes suddenly widened. "Zaku!" she shouted, surprised. "Who?" asked Nar, moving back to the hollow and sitting against the wall. "The spiky-haired one." "You didn't kill him?" she said, worried. Zaka didn't know when to quit, and that meant he'd come back for Nar, said Redhead, looked up over to his worried soon-to-be servant, no hint of concern in his eyes. "Me, don't worry. The mummy may have dodged him, but I wasn't aiming at him. I was aiming at the tiger den about 100 yards back. By the time he wakes up, the tiger would have as well, so he's fairly well, __, over right now." "Anyone else you're worried I didn't kill?" he asked nonchalantly. Chin stared at him, unable to speak. "Now then, you may want to come over here and lay down. The tree will keep out most of the wind." Chin hesitantly walked over, deciding to take a chance by laying down next to the man she was to serve as she started to nod off. She couldn't help but notice that he seemed to have a calming aura when he wasn't in the middle of carnage. As she finally felt the last bits of consciousness leaving her, she could have sworn that a sudden burst of heat came from the redhead. A cold wind blew through the clearing as night fell. Sasuke, Sakura, and Chin were asleep. Naruto was merely meditating, helping Blood with the QB. The pressure of his aura kept the creatures of the forest at bay and twisted his teammates' dreams into nightmares. Mindscape. Nar looked at the QB with no fear, only loathing. Everyone had thought the QB a demon, but as it turns out, the Beiju are only juggernauts of chakra. Blood was still absorbing the damn thing though. But the thing irking Naruto was the fact that he had been called a demon when he didn't technically house one. He did find it terribly amusing, however, to wave at the QB as its power was torn from it, all of it entering blood until there wasn't a fox to wave at. NAR looked on with awe as the sewer changed, turning into something he didn't expect the Lord of Hell to find appealing. A sunny island, plenty of grass and trees, and freshwater pools here and there. The only thing that redeemed it, in the sense of hellishness, was the giant citadel of death that loomed over the landscape. Everything about it screamed hell, but the island contradicted it. Incredibly, the castle is mine, and the island is yours. I will try not to set anything on fire, Blood said, dark cloak billowing in a non-existent wind. His sudden appearance startled NAR, but he quickly recovered. Right, was the only coherent reply that NAR could manage, though a thought did pop into his mind as the ancient king turned to his castle. Hey, Blood, didn't you say something about the binding spell? Yes, I did. You have ears? It's a miracle, he said sarcastically. It's simple. Draw your mark somewhere on her skin using a mix of ink and your blood. Then, and I will help you channel this as you are not used to your new energy sources yet. Just pour energy into it. The flow will shut off by instinct when the binding is over. Are there any words for the spell? He asked, wanting to make sure he didn't bleed into ink for no reason. Blood paused for a moment, black cloak still shifting. The spell has to be spoken in a language both people understand. So say their name, then I do bind thee to my will. My bidding will be yours to do, as will my whims. Bind. That should do. Fine, or at least something of equal meaning. Now go wake up and get to that tower. Your regeneration powers are much stronger, but some sicknesses can still get to you. Cold and damp aren't the best places to rest while your immune system is being reconstructed. Blood disappeared in a cloud of energy, leaving NAR alone. He has got to teach me that, he said, turning on his heel and walking out of his mind right back into his body. He was about to see what this body could pull off. Just as he finished fading, Blood reappeared out of thin air and stared at the spot Naruto had stood on a moment before, shrugging. As he turned back to his castle, he couldn't restrain a small chuckle as he gazed upon his now blazing right hand. Well, trial by fire was always my favorite method. I'll let him figure it out. Reality. NAR opened his eyes and found that it was midnight. Yet, even with the lack of a moon, he could see very well. He shifted his weight slightly to get comfortable when he noticed an unfamiliar weight on his lap. He quickly looked for the source only to find that Sheen had moved over to him at some point in the night and rested her head in his lap. He wasn't sure why she had moved or even if she was aware she had, but it wasn't causing him any discomfort. He shifted his weight slightly against the tree he had been leaning on and absent-mindedly began stroking Sheen's hair, much to her unconscious delight. He began musing over designs for his mark, and eventually deciding it must have a dragon, a great sword, the traditional weapon of archons, and some demonic element in it. He was slightly surprised to find sunlight hitting him in the face, wondering how long he had been thinking. And so, the day does start. He mumbled out as he pushed Sheen's head out his lap and stood, stretching as Sheen began to swear loudly, not appreciating being awoken from her sleep. She sat up and looked at her surroundings, the morning light giving little visibility. But she could see the form of the one who she was to serve soon. Get ready. We're about to haul ass, said NAR as he went to Sasuke and Sakura, nudging them with his foot until they awoke. They were obviously not used to taking orders from him, but a small burst of demonic aura changed their minds, although they were still weary of kin. An hour later, found them outside the tower resting to get their breath. Naruto was trying to find words to express his gratitude to Blood. The 6-mile run had done absolutely nothing to him. Blood merely reminded him that everyone has limits, and that he had best not forget his end of the deal. NAR nodded mentally as his teammates complained about aching muscles and sore wounds. "At least you have a day to rest now," he responded. Sasuke sent him a glare. "Yeah, but if we went a little slower, it wouldn't have been this damaging. We would have still had a day to rest, Baka," Sasuke said angrily. Sakura agreed with Sasuke, enthusiastically as usual. "Yes, why don't we spend as much time as possible in the Forest of Death? There is a reason Genin aren't allowed in, you know. It's because most of them die. If you want to go back for a stroll, be my guest. But I'm going in now," Naruto replied, a look of distaste on his face. He turned and entered, Sheen following with the dynamic duo following soon after. They deciphered the riddle on the wall with ease, though Naruto wasn't fond of the small brain buster after busting his ass in the forest and quickly threw the scrolls on the ground when they began smoking. In a poof of smoke, Yumanoa stood before his former students, a proud look upon his face until he saw NAR changing to shock. At that point, he pointed and managed to stammer out, "And Naruto W, what the hell happened?" he shouted. NAR let that feral grin spread across his face once more and answered, "Something wonderful. I'll give you a hint." He paused for a moment before continuing. 2 and the 1 became only 1 when the third one came. For fun human to something not for the third one had a thought. He offered and the other agreed. Now there is a new tale to read. He grinned even more when gained a look of understanding, then grew pale. Ra turned to the other two and put on a fake smile. "Sasuke, why don't you and Sakura go get something to eat, then go rest? I'm sure it would do you good." The Hokage said to bring NAR to his office so they could talk about a few things. "So, he'll be back in a few hours." He lied through his teeth, but it was enough to fool them. They knew NAR and the Hokage were close. So, Saruto asking to see NAR after this test was predictable. "Take Chin with you to the room. Tie her up if you're paranoid. But if I find one hair out of place, bad things will happen," NAR said, letting their imaginations do the work. As they went off, they walked off, heading to the medical area first. Ira turned to NAR with a worried face. "Let's go to the sanding then. He'll definitely want to know about this," he said. Naruto nodding and grabbed shoulder so he could use the body flicker technique to get them there much quicker. Hokage's office. Sartobi was perfectly happy. All the paperwork was done. He was alone to read his Ika, and there weren't going to be any disturbances. He was going to send a Jonin to the forest tower in an hour or so that they could bring Naruto to him when he got to the tower. He was surprised then when appeared in his office in a swirl of leaves with a red-haired Genin with him. Before he could comment though, he saw who the Genin was and his jaw dropped. Naruto smiled softly and gave a small bow, surprising both of the adults. This must have been big for him to be showing respect. "So how you been, Gramps?" he asked nonchalantly. Sarobi gained his voice once more and answered, "And NR, what happened to you?" he shouted quickly, putting up a sound barrier. Naruto let out a dark chuckle, sending a chill through Saruto. "Well, the QB didn't do this if that's what you're worried about," he said, taking a seat. Both Sarbai and Ra let out breaths that they didn't know they were holding until they realized what he just said. How do you know about the QB?" They both shouted in unison. Naruto gave them a half-hearted glance before answering. "When you live in a village that calls you QB brat at least 5 times a day, you generally catch on. Now then, would you like to know what changed me so?" Saruto sighed and lit up his pipe, knowing he was going to need it. Naruto proceeded to tell them everything that happened in the Forest of Death, starting with the starting gates, ending with the arrival at the tower. The more he spoke, the more concerned the two became. Orochimaru's presence was a bad sign as it was, but given the deal Naruto had made, it only made matters worse. Erika had heard of legends of a demon named Blood, but Sarutobi knew the whole story of the Lord of Hell, or at least more than Ra. Sarutobi tried to explain this to Naruto that he needed to cancel the deal, but the response he got wasn't one he had expected. No, I never break a vow. I do not lie, and I refuse to break the contract that I signed in full awareness of its meaning. NAR, please listen to reason. No, you listen, Sama. I am no longer the vessel of Q.bi. I am free, the one thing that you failed to give me. You think you know of blood, but tell me what is it you know? NAR shouted. Sarutobi suddenly rose, letting a little killing intent into the room. But it did little to NAR. He was a purebred demon born in the depths of hell. Dash was all he could say before a massive amount of killing intent flooded the room. Blood rose for the shadows, his eyes showing disdain for the aged man. Boy, do not tempt me to kill you by insulting my heritage. My name is Blood, son of a half-dragon demon and a hound archon. Blood let his cloak fall to the ground, revealing his form to the three. He stood tall as ever, but now you could see that he was very muscular. A fine coat of red fur covered him, and on that red fur were designs in black. Natural or not, they didn't know. He wore no shirt, but he had on heavy boots, baggy pants tucked into said boots, and heavy metal guards on the outer sides of the pants. Upon his right shoulder was a metal band that wrapped all the way around his arm, with a similar one on his wrist. Both seemed to be part of him, and there were at least 100 chains connecting the two. From his back came 6 black dragon's wings, but it was his head that gained the most attention. It was that of a dog, but it had the sharpness of a dragon's as well along, with 2 black horns pointing back from his head. I do not take pleasure in being called an honorless demon, and you would do well to remember that. I shall honor the contract signed, as will Narrate, and as such, you two are to stay out of this. However, he paused a moment, pulling out a large scroll out of nowhere that Sarutobi recognized as a summoning contract. What he does with what I gave him is up to him. I only wish to see the world. He may share the summoning contract with whomever he wishes. He may grant power to those he wishes. He may fight as he wishes. It does not matter to me. I suggest you begin thinking with an open mind. Though, it's much less likely to get you killed. Blood turned and was consumed by the shadows. The only things marking his arrival were the summoning contract and the burnt carpet where he stood. Narrate grabbed the contract and looked at the almost tribal markings that were put onto it. Sarutobi and stood still, scared stiff. The most powerful demon in history had just come out of the shadows, spoke to them, and was more than slightly pissed. Sarutobi wasn't known as the professor for nothing, so he quickly saw the usefulness of a container with a demo, an entity that would willingly give him power. The only part that bothered him was the fact that everyone was about to use someone he considered family as a weapon. Ira, he said, gaining the man's attention. You have the rest of the day off. Go relax. I wish to have a few words with NAR regarding his new status. NAR cocked an eyebrow, confused. Araka nodded. The rest of the day spent at the pub sounded wonderful right now. He left, mumbling about how he would send the bill to the Hokage's office. So tell me, what do you mean by new status? Asked Nero, a smirk tugging at his lips. Sarutobi sighed before responding. You aren't the container for the QB anymore, so I have to change that. But the problem is I can't say what you contain now without some big issues. So perhaps you or Blood in his infinite wisdom can come up with something," he said, the last part dripping with sarcasm. "Bloodline would be pushing it. A genjutsu that has been maintained all these years is way too unrealistic. Well, I have an idea that might work, but those issues you spoke of would still pop up, but much farther down the line than originally planned." Nero paused and Sartois made a motion for him to continue. "Say exactly what happened. Just change a few words." "Like what? Pray tell?" "Say, I made a pact with a demonic dragon for power, but an Archon interfered and gave me its power as well. It's either that or Plan B." "Plan B?" "You call the ninja into a meeting after the preliminaries, and I tell them what happened. After the Tunin exams, if the rest of the villagers don't know, then I tell them. If they wish to kill me, then they must first realize that I do not contain the demon that destroyed the village 12 years ago. After that, if they try, I will kill them. As easy as that would be, you'd end up killing just about everyone. Any other bright ideas? You could just say any attacks made on me will be counted as treason, punishable as such. That would discourage the bulk. The rest who try to kill me would be either too stupid or too blind to live." Next question. Sorobi sat there a moment, seeing the truth in his words. It would cause problems in the village for a while, but it would reduce the chance of an enemy finding out and spreading the word that way. Eventually, everyone would know exactly which demon Naruto made a pact with unless he told them first, but better break it to them easy. Fine, it's your condition. Given the power boost that will no doubt be coming, I can have you moved up to Tune in Right and Dash. No, I will earn my rank. I don't want to be handed things my archonic side won't let me. I will proceed as normal. If I fail, I fail. Having all the power in the world isn't any good if you can't use it," Naruto quickly said, cutting Sarutobi off. Suddenly, he zoned out, coming back to in a few seconds, wincing. "What is it?" asked Sarbai, mildly concerned. Naruto winced once more, as if the very thought pained him. "Blood just told me the only way to control, or at least filter my power well enough for me to use it. Remember those chains on his right arm?" Sorobi nodded. "The metal plates they are. Attached to or grafted into Blood's skin when he was a child. Back then, there were 5 chains, each one representing 20% of his power. The stronger he got, the more he added until he had 100. Zar." Toby paused slightly when he realized what he meant. "You don't mean?" "Yes, I'll need 10 chains. Blood can preform the ritual, but I'll be immobilized for about a week after. He said he'll do it after the preliminaries, but if you could find 10 of the highest quality chains in Konoha and keep them here until it's time, the links won't matter. The spell makes the conform to my arm. Oh, and I'll need the location of a tattoo artist." "Why a tattoo artist?" he asked slightly confused. Naruto chuckled. "It's tradition for demons to have markings, and archons often did the same. So I figured, why not? I'm not going to be able to do anything more strenuous than walking for about 3 days after the initial week." Naruto responded with a feral grin. Saruto shrugged, adding this to the __. It list. "Naruto, there is one more thing that you should know before you leave. It's about your parents and your inheritance." Nar froze. This had always irked him, and now he would finally know. Saruto proceeded to tell Nar about his parents, Minato Namix and Kusha Uzumaki. Nar listened with completely, never missing a word as the aged Kag told the boy everything he knew of his parents. At the end of the tale, Naruto had a few falling from his eyes and a glad smile on his face. When it came to the inheritance itself, he was smiling like he used to. They had left him the clan compound, a small fortune, and their jutsu library. It slightly saddened Naruto when Blood told him that He wouldn't be able to use the jutsu until he converted them to using one of his new energy sources. But it gave him a new goal. Naruto told Naruto he would give him the keys and lead him to the house. After the preliminaries, Naruto nodded and walked out the door, a smile on his face and the contract under his arm. Sarutobi gave a small chuckle when Naruto stuck his head back in and asked if he could get taken back to the tower. At the tower, Sasuke stared out the window, rage on his face. How could his do of a teammate get so much power when he needed it? It infuriated him to no end. Yet at the same time, he couldn't help but feel this could prove beneficial. His rival was stronger, so he now had a chance to grow stronger. NR wasn't weak anymore, so he now had some respect from the brooding AIHA. Sakura sat in the corner trying to figure out what had happened to NR. Before she had fainted, he was the same old orange ninja. But when she awoke, he was a red-haired badass. She couldn't make heads or tails of it. But she was sure of one thing. He scared her now. Kakashi leaned against the wall reading his porn, unaware of what was troubling his two students. He would have asked, but this was the good part of the book. He was half curious where Naruto was, but he would have been informed if he had died. He shrugged, going back to reading his porn tower, private room. NAR had finished the array and was applying the mark on to Kin's bare back. She had been slightly upset when Naruto told her to remove her shirt, but he said she could turn around and hold a sheet over her breast so long as he could get to her back. So there she sat, still annoyed, but she complied while Naruto put the finishing touches on the mark. It was a great sort of a holy make with a worm wrapped around it. And the background was an ancient demonic rune with similarly ancient runes around it, each the mark representing a different dragon, mainly ones of great power such as Bahamut and Tiamat. It was complex, but the more runes of power the mark held, the stronger the control of the subject would be. Blood told him that, since Jean willingly joined him, the mark would simply make it hard for her to refuse direct orders instead of breaking her will first. It would take absolutely no concentration for him to keep the mark active. So the only thing that would free Jean would be the total destruction of Naruto's soul. He had also warned Naruto that, as is the case of servants of the opposite sex, Jean would be sexually attracted to him. It would be little more than the feeling of having a crush, but any further feelings would be Jean's own. "This may hurt," Naruto said quietly, tapping into the archonic power he had. It made him feel so good, as if he were truly in heaven. But he pushed the feeling aside and uttered the spell, slamming his hand into the center of the mark that took up the majority of Jean's back. He felt blood channeling his other two energies, but they were far off rivers to him. She cried out as the mark was sealed into her skin, but it was over quickly, and they were both panting. Naruto put his hand on her shoulder and called upon his archonic power once more for the simplest spell that every archon knew by instinct: heal. Jean felt a soothing wave of energy rush through her body that made her sleepy. But she remained awake as Naruto removed his hand to wipe some sweat from his forehead. He could barely tap into his power and could only do one or two spells or techniques from any of the three. He cracked his back and handed Jean her shirt before moving to one of the two beds in the room. He dozed off fairly quickly, quick enough not to notice Ken slipping into bed with him or Blood's barking laughter. Next day, 2 hours before start of prelims, Naruto opened his eyes and looked around sleepily, noting that the alarm clock said that the preliminaries were in 2 hours. He tried to roll over, but found his right side weighed down. Having a vague idea what it was, he turned his head to the side to find Ken snuggled up to his side, mumbling some interesting things in her sleep. Naruto tuned her out before he was too tempted to take advantage of his servant and got out of bed by slipping out the other side. Ken went a bit before grabbing a pillow and using it in Naruto's place. Blood wasn't kidding. "She really wants me," Naruto said under his breath, careful not to wake her up. He quietly slipped into the bathroom to relieve himself and get a quick shower. And to his delight, Chin was apparently a heavy sleeper. The shower was very loud. He left the bathroom to find another set of his clothes on the unused bed. A note from Blood explaining that a new set would form when he needed one until he learned to materialize his own rested on top. After donning his clothes, he wrote a quick note for Kin to stay here until the end of the preliminaries, so she wasn't caught. With that done, he left the room, locking the door behind him. He checked the clock in the hall to find it was almost time for the preliminaries. The main battle room, or whatever it's called. Nar stood by himself. The only people recognizing him were Ino, Shikamaru, Chuji, Sasuke, Sakura, and the Hokage. The rest either paid him no mind, thought he was a backup proctor, or something of the like. The Hokage announced how these preliminaries would be carried out. Mainly, the match will continue until one opponent is dead or incapacitated and their random selections. Nar leaned back against the wall, waiting for his name while others fought. All the fights are the same, but Tamari fights Ka. Instead, still winning though, Shino and Chuji fight, and Shino wins. Naruto stifled a yawn as the blonde girl from Suna decimated KBA. The only interesting match had been between Rock Lee and Gar. No Sabaku. That sand power was obviously from a demon, the Shikaku, if he wasn't mistaken. In truth, the only thing keeping him awake was the wait for his match, which was apparently the last. Finally, he heard his name called. Well, Naruto Uzumaki and Tenten Mizuhara. Don't know what it means, if anything just came to mind. Please come down for their match, said the proctor. The call filled with coughs. Nar walked down slowly, taking his time while Tenten merely jumped. They got to the center and faced off, getting into their stances. Tenten with a katana. Nar in a feral stance that bellied great power. Ready? The proctor asked after a moment, and getting nods, he continued. Begin. He jumped out of the way in time as Ten went on the offensive. To her credit, she wasn't swinging wildly. This was a deadly dance. The two were preforming, Tenten swinging and Naruto dodging. But the cycle was broken when Tenten lashed out with a kick that landed in the center of Naruto's chest, knocking him back a good 5T from the surprise of the blow. Tenten smirked. You should have waited a year, kid. I'm way stronger. Give up now, and I won't hurt you, she said as she pulled out 2 scrolls. Guy's eyes widened as he realized she was going all out. Naruto merely smirked back, slightly unnerving. Now, why would I go and do that? I'm just warming up. Tenten glared and undid the scrolls, calling out her technique, which has escaped my mind. Holy hell, Naruto said as the rain of weapons came down on him, a sight that would have frozen just about every other Jinnon. Nar smirked and decided to try something. Demon's Art. Hell's Guard. He shouted as a large burning sphere surrounded him. The use of a demon technique was surprising, but its effect was truly shocking. Not only did it protect Nar, but it incinerated any weapon that touched it, and the wires attached to them were superheated, burning Tenten's fingers and made her release them or face the inability to use them for the duration of the fight, if not longer. Damn it, she thought, her fingers still aching from the wires. She glared at Naruto as the shell went down to reveal the red-haired Jin in panting. One demonic spell down, 1 to go, he thought as he decided to try his luck. He inhaled deeply, his chest expanding. Blood decided to comment at this point in time. Do you know the saying, trial by fire? 'Cause you're often element. Blood laughed as Naruto cocked an eyebrow. He expelled the breath expecting some sort of flame, only to find a line of electricity shooting from his mouth. To his credit, it burnt a hole in the wall and several trees outside the building as well. Totally fit, Naruto said, finding his tongue was numb. It wore off, but still damp. Luckily for her anyway, Tintin had managed to dodge the beam with only a bad case of static charge, which made it very hard for her to hold a weapon. Nar smirked as she finally lost enough of the charge to pick up a weapon. Ready to lose yet, or shall I drag this out some more, cause I got to tell you kicking you ass is the most fun I've had all week. Well, aside from killing those teams from the village hidden in the sound, the arena froze save for a select few. Having killed a Jinnin rank was no small feat, but having killed teams was something unheard of. Tintin tried to call him on it only to be surprised. Yeah, right. You probably showed up after they were dead, she yelled. Naruto narrowed his eyes. Tintin didn't realize what she said. Unfortunately for her, she decided not to shut up. What kind of ninja are you? Lying is the act of those without honor. She would have continued, but the arena was flooded with a volatile energy that seemed to reek of power. Nar glared with the force of an army of demons, his stare burning a hole through her very soul. He then uttered the last words of the match. Art of the Vorpal sword, he said as a spectral blade made its way into his hand. It looked to be a long sword with its blade shaped like a bolt of lightning, and its edge looked sharp enough to cut souls, as if on command it bursts into flames. The act shocking everyone. He charged the arena, seeming to shift with each step, due to his aura distorting Tintin's senses. And in a flash, he appeared behind her. The swing complete. A jagged cut tore its way up her back, and the flames cauterized the wound immediately, leaving no chance of healing without a scar. The pain made her black out, and as she fell, the aura faded until Nar stood with the sword in his hand, the blood boiling from its edge. Winner! Nar Uzumaki! The proctor shouted. Yet, no one moved nor made a sound. The only noise made was from the crackling of the flames from Naruto's blade, which soon disappeared in a flash of flames. He turned and walked up the stairs, only to be halted by the Hokage's voice. Will all winners please come to the floor to decide who will fight who in the next round? He shouted, slightly wincing as Nar turned from the stairs with that burning glare still on his face. They lined up with Nar at the end as far away as possible. As they were drawing numbers, they silently prayed not to fight Nar save for Sasuke and Gar, who wanted to fight the demonic boy. Oh, if only they knew. They were glad that Naruto was at the end, as when he reached into the box, it burst into flames along with the paper that held his number. But it took no great mind to figure out he was number 2, the only one left. That meant Neji was his opponent. That also meant there would probably be a charred corpse in that ring before he was done. The Genin stared at the opponents, but Neji was forced to look away when Naruto sent that blazing glare his way. Truly was something that seemed to scar your soul. As Naruto left the ring, everyone let out a breath of relief. If nothing else, he was scary as __ now. Sorry though. The ninja meeting afterwards would be hectic enough without the addition of an irritated hybrid. Will all Jonin please come to my office at 5, and anyone who is late will be demoted to Jinon. No exceptions, said the aged Kag as he flickered back to his office to await the arrival of the Jun for an hour. With Nar, he walked to a training ground, intent on mass destruction. That __ he shouted, cleaving a tree in half with his blazing sword. How dare she insult my honor? Call me a liar? Ha! With every sentence, a tree fell. He heard footsteps behind him and swung, but the blade was caught by a clawed hand. Blood stood, his cloak of shadows back in place with an amused look in his glowing eyes. Narrate mellowed out slightly, and the blade disappeared in a quick flash once more. Not bad, calling. Forth your sword twice in one day, using a fraction of your berserker mode, and using your pride and honor as a base for it all in one day. Still, you must learn restraint. I speak from experience when I say killing everyone who insults you is relieving, but it causes more difficulty down the road. As much as I'd like to inform you of some of these difficulties, you're going to be late for the meeting that the Hokage is having. The one where you're supposed to explain the situation regarding my residency. Now go. With that, the aged hybrid disappeared in the usual way. Stepping back into the shadows, Naruto sighed and ran towards the Hokage Tower, trying to find an eloquent way of breaking it to the Junin and Chunin. All genin and civilians would either find out from the ninja from today or the day after the finals. The Tower Council Room. Most of the ninja here were used to being called for group meetings by the Hokage without knowing what they were here for. But the council member were more irritable. They were usually the one who called meetings, not the Hokage, so they were quite annoyed. Danzo called out to Saruti, trying to pry the purpose of this meeting from him, but to no avail. Hokage-sama, why are we waiting? All the ninja are here as you requested, and we are her as well. So why are we waiting? He asked, trying to mask his anger. Saruta cast him a detached glance, furthering Danzo's anger, and said, one sentence. We're waiting for the guest of honor. With that, the doors to the council room burst open as if on cue, and in stepped Nar, trench coat moving in an unseen breeze. His presence alone created an air of anger. It was expected when only a handful of people liked him, though. He ignored it and made his way to the Hokage. Sorry, I'm late. Destruction therapy. Shall we begin? He asked, a small grin on his face. Saratobi nodded and stood, clearing his throat before starting. Thank you all for coming here on such short notice. There is something that should be brought to your attention. An event that happened in the Forest of Death that will more than likely alter history. Sarobi paused a moment before continuing. 12 years ago, the Yindame saved the village from the Cubino Knockets by sealing it into a newborn. I made a law that no one could tell this boy about the fox, but it seems he found out on his own. I don't know how long Narrate knew, but it doesn't matter anymore. The fox is gone. Murmurs went through the crowd as this news was told. Many looked at Narrate, hatred still in their eyes. This is where I leave the tale to Nar, as I don't know what happened in the Forest of Death. There was a long silence as everyone looked to Nar, who in turn merely waited a moment. Then as things began to get tense, he spoke. I'm going to be blunt about this, but listen to everything before your feeble human minds lock onto one train of though. Again in the forest, my team was attacked by Orochimaru in disguise. We lived, but he gave Sasuke a cursed mark and left us beaten and bloodied. The next day, we were attacked by two teams. From sound, we defeated one ninja with the help of Team 10, but the other 5 outmatched us. He looked out the window in silent recollection before continuing. I was forcing myself not to call of Q.B's power. I refused to let him fight my battles for me. When all hope seemed lost, the world slowed to a crawl before stopping completely. An ancient voice spoke to me, offering a deal. He gets rid of the QB and gives me his powers in return for me becoming his new vessel and seeing the world. I agreed and signed the contract he made. Then his energies garbed me in what you see now. The world started turning again, and I gave the sound teams a chance. Surrender and live. Because of what I am now, I couldn't go back on my word. When one of them laid down her weapons, she lived. On a whim, I suppose, I made her my servant, and as such, out of the reach of you idiots, he said, motioning to the council. The rest were killed. I got Captain Emo and the pink weakling to the tower. The rest is either already known or unimportant. There was silence in the room. Then, a storm of shouts filled the room, mainly saying that this was one of the Q.B's tricks, or that they should kill him for insulting the council. Silence, fools. The room went quiet as Blood emerged from the shadows without his cloak. While his appearance had silenced them, it was his choking aura that was keeping them so. You humans cease to amaze me. I've been asleep for 10,000 years, and nothing has changed about you idiots. Demon, this devil that Satan hit me with. A wiffle ball bat. If it isn't human, you think that makes it 3 things. Bloodthirsty, evil, and something that should be killed. I made a deal with Narut, and part of it was to remove the QB. Want proof? Here, see for yourselves. Blood took out an orb from his pouch and held it out. In the orb was the QB writhing in agony. Everyone's eyes widened. It was true. Blood returned the orb to its pouch before continuing. Do not think for a second that I'm some kind of savior. I am the king of hell. I used to kill you empty things in droves for fun, and I'm very tempted to start doing it again. If you piss me off, I will bring your dead loved ones back to life to kill you. After I kill the ones that are still alive. The seal keeps most of my power back, but I still have enough to make the QB look like a kitten. It does not, however, bind me. I can come and go as I please, so long as I'm within a few miles of Naruto, so one night I might get bored and kill you all. He turned to the council, a sadistic smirk on his face. He moved his arm and aimed it at Danzo and let out a dark laugh as the Warhawk's eyes widened. Suddenly, one of the chains that didn't control his power detached itself from his shoulder, though still attached at the wrist, and moved like a snake in front of him. Get over here, he shouted, the chain shooting out and impaling Danzo, though the center of his chest. Blood pulled. The chain and Danzo was pulled from his seat and was caught by the throat by Blood. I know a demon who just loves skinning people alive, putting salt on the wound, and then putting their skin back on. I think it's about time he got a new visitor. His knife might be a little rusty, but I'm sure you won't mind. Blood opened up a red spiraling portal and stepped through, taking Danzo with him. As the portal closed, the room looked to Nar and the Hawkhag. Any questions? Sartobi asked. He was actually planning on thanking Blood. He just saved him a lot of trouble. When one of the Juans actually raised her hand, his sweat dropped. She was jumping around like a little kid. What is it, Anko? Can I have his autograph? She asked with a smile. Naruto blinked a few times, unsure of what he just heard. Not many humans would ask for such a thing from Blood. Next time I see him, I'll ask him. Now, any other questions? I do have something to do today, replied Naruto, hoping that he could get out of there ASAP. To his relief, it looked like they were going to stay quiet. He turned to the Hawkeye and nodded. Sarobi, in turn, handed Narut a sheet of paper. Narut made his way through the crowd, restraining a dark chuckle when some of the weaker Chunin parted for him. Namek's clan compound living room. The place was huge, if nothing else. The living room alone was at least 50 feet across with a similar width. Not to mention, it already had all the furniture he needed and then some. He spent some time looking around and found a large number of bedrooms and bathrooms, a fully stocked kitchen with a note from the Hawkhag. The fully stocked bit was his doing, a hot ring, a dojo. Inside, an outdoor training area with dummies, a meditation room, and a room that held a small shrine. The shrine itself was confusing, though. It bore no mark of a particular deity, nor did it really resemble a shrine of any sort. It just felt like some kind of shrine. Naruto had to pick his jaw up from the floor when he saw the size of the library. It was the size of a house on its own. A house full of jutsu before he got too crazy. Blood's words rang through his mind. He wouldn't be able to use any of them until he figured out how to convert them to an energy type he could use. He shut the door and looked around some more, eventually finding the master bedroom and bathroom on the top floor. After unpacking, he sat down to the living room once more, only to find two unexpected guests. Blood stood calmly, the chains from Sarobi in his hand, and Chin sat in one of the chairs, fast asleep. Naruto sighed and put a blanket over Chin, who was once again muttering some interesting things involving whipped cream. Turning his attention to Blood in hopes of restraining himself, he noted that Blood did look a little annoyed. "Something wrong?" he asked. Blood looked at him warningly. "You do realize this will be the most painful thing you ever experience, right? After this, all other pain will seem insignificant. If that gives you any hint, just be prepared," was all he said, before clearing a space in the living room. The array drawn was the most complex thing NAR had ever seen. But as he moved to the center, he felt the enormous pressure that it created. He stood against the pressure, his right arm stretched out to the side. Blood sighed as his cloak burned away. He really didn't feel like performing this damned ritual. Then the array burned with a bloody red light as the energy began spiraling. Blood gave a dark smile. The ritual did allow him to unleash more than he was used to. Only someone with the power of the King of Hell could perform the ritual, and the previous king had done it to him. Blood put a hand on Naruto's shoulder and burned off his shirt, pumping so much demonic energy into the skin turned red and almost boiled. NAR had braced himself, but he cried out as the fresh waves hit him. Blood focused the energy more and more until it formed a band around his shoulder and part of his torso. This meant he was almost done with that area. He added even more, solidifying it into a blood-red metal band that buried itself into Naruto's flesh, eliciting another scream from him. Blood removed his hand from the shoulder, but quickly grabbed Naruto's right wrist and began flooding it with archonic energy. Instead of the normal soothing feeling that it normally held for NAR, it burned him worse than the demonic energy. The process was an exact replica of the shoulder, and although the band would be smaller, no less energy was added. The band formed and attached itself, but Blood had a few more things to do. He took the chains in his hand and began pumping them full of Draionic energies, until runes began etching themselves into the links and the lengthened to fit Naruto's arm. Blood let go of the chains, letting them fly to the metal plates and attach themselves. This brought forth another scream from Naruto. They seemed to burn like fire, not only on his skin, but he felt his energy being absorbed into the chains with a burning sensation. Then the pain stopped so suddenly Naruto almost blacked out. Blood said words so old the very world seemed to question their meaning. Then he touched the chains. The blood and damage the heat had done were wiped clean from the chains, leaving them a bright silver. The plates on his arm also turned silver, shining in the twilight that crawled in the windows. Then the world went black as the ritual took its toll, and NAR slipped into unconsciousness. Blood watched as he hit the floor, chains rattling. He then waved his hand, cleaning the living room of soot and blood before picking NAR up and warped to the master bedroom where he laid NAR down and left. He was tired himself, but he needed to make sure NAR actually survived this. He sank into the shadows, but never truly left Naruto's mind. The sound of waves on a beach awoke him. He sat up and opened his eyes, looking at the ocean in front of him. He sat there for a long time just staring at the endless waves. Then he felt it like a pull on his very being, a call he couldn't ignore. He turned from the ocean and walked towards where the call brought him, casting a glance over his shoulder at the waves beckoning him to come back and sit on the sandy beach to meditate forever. He walked on, passing by Blood's castle, and ended up near the center of the island before the call seemed to cease. Before him stood what he was now, or what he was to become. A large red-skinned demon stood to his right, large wings coming from his back. He stood at almost 10 feet with huge horns coming from his head. He wore only ragged shorts, and flames danced over his broad form. At his side was a vorpal sword like Naruto's, only more flames, and it seemed even sharper. His onyx eyes stared at Nar with apathy. To Naruto's left stood what he assumed to be a hound archon. He stood at roughly 6 foot in, and his muscular body was covered in a fine layer of blood-red fur. He was garbed in baggy pants tucked into his heavy boots, and a white tunic with a holy coat over that. His dog-like head held pure white eyes that seemed to inspire Nar, and along his back was a great sword of holy make. In the middle stood the more impressive of the three, a 50-foot dragon with lightning blue scales. He gazed at Nar, flexing his large wings every now and then, staring with gray orbs. From just behind his nostrils to between his eyes protruded a jagged golden horn that sparked with electricity. His sharp claws tore through the ground when he flexed them. All in all, a scary sight. There was an unspoken conversation between the four of them. The only sounds came from their breathing. The Archon walked off into a grove of trees. The demon strode off towards the beach. The dragon flew off into the skies, and Naruto walked back towards Castle Hellcry. Their meeting was short and silent, but Naruto now knew what these three were, what he would become if he fully embraced one aspect. And the hound doth howl into the night, fighting to return things to right. The bat flaps his wings, and the wind begins burning things. The lizard stares at the violent storm, the lightning giving him form. The path I carve will be followed by crows. For now, nightfall comes where darkness goes. Naruto shook his head and laughed. I think blood is rubbing off on me. He looked over his shoulder, still chuckling slightly. He smiled and walked on, intent on beginning to make a place of meditation in his own mind for once. He stood in a small clearing, concentrating. Soon, trees began growing around him, and a pool formed in the middle of the clearing. Nar sighed, content on enjoying every moment he could because he knew as soon as he could move, he was going to have to train. A feral grin trailed its way across his face. That Huga kid didn't know who he was, with 3 days later, Nar was hoping that this ritual had been worth it. Being unable to do anything but lay on his left side, and with concentration get up to relieve himself. He was actually glad that Sheen had finished her interrogation the day prior. She was a lifesaver while he was in the earlier stages. Still, she seemed nervous around him. She probably wasn't too sure that he wasn't going to rape her, and the seal's effect on her in that regard more than likely left her with a very confusing set of emotions. "Nay, Kin-chan," he called out, wondering if she could hear him in the living room. In a matter of moments, the door to the bedroom slowly opened, and Kin stepped in with a forced neutral face. "Yes, master," she asked, trying to disguise her dislike of the word. "Never say that again," Nar said, a fire lighting inside of his chest. "Call me Naruto-sama, as in Lord Nar, if you must, but I never want to hear you call me master." Understood? Sheen was taken aback by the venom in his voice, but quickly nodded. There was an awkward silence for the girl, though Naruto quickly calmed himself and remembered why he had called her. "Could you bring me some water? I'm out," he said softly, inclining his head to the empty glass resting on the bedside table. Sheen was silent as she walked over and took the empty glass, trying to avoid her master's gaze. As she left, she made sure the door was shut before letting out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She was still scared to death. that he might rape her or kill her. But ever since the ritual, her dreams had been filled by him, but it wasn't how she had imagined it. In the dreams, they were intimate, but it was more in the romantic sense. And he had been nice so far, despite the obvious pain he was in. "Maybe I'm being paranoid," she muttered, as she filled the glass. If something was going to go sour, it should have already happened. The only rough spot had been the master thing a few moments prior. She shook her head and decided to at least try and be nice. She couldn't help but wonder why he had spared her, though. Why go through the trouble of keeping her alive? As she neared the door, she heard a dark voice from the other side. Nar was talking to someone. Against her better judgment, she pressed her ear to the door and listened. "I don't see why you're being so nice to her. She is your slave, and more than that, she is a prisoner of war. Such leniency isn't becoming of a demon," the dark voice said, sending chills down Ken's spine. "She's human, not some sort of beast to be locked in a cage. I'm being nice to her because, unlike everyone else around me, if she starts to hate me, she can't leave. Call me soft, but I'm not one for emotional tortures," came Naruto's voice, defending Ken. "Well, she's your slave. I suppose it's up to you. Still, try not to grow too sentimental." "I'd hate to see you hurt," Blood said sarcastically. "Were you hugged as a child?" "No, that explains a lot. Anyway, can you go?" "Ken's standing outside, and I don't want her to have a heart attack when she sees you." "Spoil sport." There was a loud whooshing sound before Narek called her in. "You knew I was listening?" Ken asked as she set the water on the table. "And they are the end. Anyway, thank you for bringing the water," he said, giving her a soft smile. "You're welcome, Naret-sama." There was a small pause as the two looked at each other, taking in details like they were meeting anew. "You need to relax. I might be a demon, but I'm not evil," Naruto said as he let his eyes drift shut. "I won't hurt you." Sheen was silent as he seemingly fell asleep. She looked at his right arm, taking in the angry red skin and the silver metal. The ritual had woken her up the other day. The nearly screams of agony. She smiled a little and walked out, knowing there were worse fates than being a servant to a kind demon. 1 week for days later. Hot Springs. Naret stared across the water at an old guy who was obviously peeping on the women's side of the springs. After listening to the old giggle for a few minutes, he decided enough was enough. He sneaked up behind him, forgoing any powers he had, and planted the hardest kick he could on that pervert's ass. Apparently, when enhanced muscles hit a distracted Sannin, it's enough to launch said ninja over a 10-foot fence. Naret leaned against a tree as he listened to the sounds of someone getting the living kicked out of them, moving his finger in the air like he was conducting an orchestra. In truth, he was very accurate. Had one been able to see both at once, they might have thought he was actually controlling the fire. Murder. About 5 minutes later, he was sent flying over the fence, beaten and bloodied. He landed in front of Naret, who in turn nudged him with his foot to see if he was alive enough to torment some more. To his delight, the man was still alive, which meant he could send him back over the wall. "Hey, Gramps, you dead?" Nero asked, half expecting him not to answer. It came as a full surprise when he jumped back, all of his injuries gone, and went through some quick hand signs. Confetti began falling as he did a weird dance that would scare small children. "Of course I'm okay. Don't you know who I am? I'm one of the Sannin, teacher of the Yendame, and writer of the famed Ika Ika series. I am Jiraiya, the toad." "Sage," he yelled as if to prove a point. He summoned a small toad. "Okay, so you're ancient senile. You trained a dead guy and you write porn. Oh yes, I tremble at your greatness. Now turn back towards the hot springs so I can get a clear shot. Naruto made a turning motion with his finger just to piss him off. Jiraiya stared at the boy. Most people at least bowed and showed a little respect even if they didn't want to. This kid just insulted him and told him to turn so he could kick him again. Wait again. You kicked me into the springs? The old pervert yelled. Nar yawned bored since he wouldn't be able to kick him again, mainly due to the fact that the blood went back into the head on his neck. Yeah, I did. For a Sannin, you really don't pay attention, do you? For the love of Hieronius, I'm a Genin. And I not only got behind you without being noticed, but launched your ass into the air before you even realized what was going on. Really, just damn, man. Naruto patted Jiraiya on the shoulder and turned. Planning on leaving to get lunch? Not planning on being stopped. Kid, I was distracted, but you now have my full attention. So what's stopping me from kicking your ass for that little stunt you just pulled? Jiraiya was just trying to intimidate Naruto a little. He knew who he was, and the Sandaime had asked him to come and train the boy a bit. The feral grin on the kid's face did worry him slightly. Well, first off, I now have a clear shot at your nuts that would launch you back into the women's side. Secondly, said Nar, pointing behind Jiraiya. He looked behind him to see blood standing in his cloak, his eyes glowing from under his big hood. Fair warning, I don't control him, so if he decides to maim you horribly, oh well. Blood grinned and sank into the shadows. Nar would tell him when to come out, sometimes just to freak people out. In several cases, he did maim people, but Blood said in his defense that only 2 died and he only ate 1. It was also hard to argue /L at the Lord of Hell. Although brief, Blood's appearance and exit unnerved Jiraiya, at least enough to raise his guard. He turned back to Naruto, who still had the remnants of a grin on his face. He had agreed to train the boy, but he had a feeling that this would take some doing. All right, brat, you've piqued my interest, he said, trying to disarm some of the tension in the air. Nar may have been cheery on the outside, but one look at his eyes revealed how ready he was to bolt should need be. Oh joy, was his response. In truth, he was hoping this meant he could get some training out of the old pervert. So, what you going to train me now or something? I'm tempted to say or something, but I made a promise to an old friend that entails me training you. Jiraiya went through some quick hand signs and summoned a toad of decent size. The toad opened its mouth and gave the scroll it held to Jiraiya, then disappeared. Jiraiya began walking off, motioning for Nar to follow. 10 minutes later, a random stream. Jiraiya had laid the scroll out on the ground and crossed his arms. Okay, bite your thumb and sign your name in blood on the contract. Then, put your handprint at the space in the bottom. After that, I'll show you how to summon toads, he said, starting to enter lecture mode. Naruto's eyes widened before a sadistic grin came to his face. Jiraiya cocked an eyebrow as Nar concentrated, but both his eyebrows shot to his hairline as another summoning scroll appeared. Thanks for telling me how to make this damn thing work. Blood wouldn't tell me, __, and the spaces were confusing me, said Naruto as he opened the scroll and bit his thumb, letting a lot of blood out. He signed his name and left his hand print, but as he lifted his hand, a cold wind blew through the area. The scroll rolled itself up and disappeared. But that didn't concern Nar. You show me how to summon now, Jiraiya. I twitched at the lack of respect. I don't know. If you keep disrespecting me, I don't think I'll teach you anything, replied Jiraiya, trying to scare some respect into the little bastard. It didn't work either. Show me how to summon, or I'll have blood hold you still while I gather up all the women in the village, ninja and civilian, and tell them 2 things. Where you are, and that you spied on them while they were in the hot springs. Now pick one showing me how to summon or castration, he said, a feral grin on his face, fangs glinting. Normally Jiraiya wouldn't be scared of a Jin on, but the cloaked thing that had shown up earlier worried him. That, and the thought of a village worth of women coming to kill him. Or worse, he had to stop himself from clutching his nuts protectively. You are a decent negotiator, brat. Fine, I'll show you the damn summoning. After that, it's up to you, Jiraiya grumbled out. If this wasn't for that promise to the Sand Aim, then he would be more objective, but he was fairly well boned on this one. He went through the hand, signed slowly so Naruto could see them before walking over to a tree and sitting at its base, taking out a bottle of sake to calm his nerves. He wasn't sure he wanted to know what came out of that contract. 5 hours later found Nar just about to pass out from exhaustion. He simply couldn't build up enough energy to use the summoning. Jiraiya had began to formulate a plan to make him use the QB, but Naruto caught the look in his eye and ended that there. So what do you propose we do now? You've got a summoning contract you're not strong enough to use, and I'm out of sake, Jiraiya said, clearly annoyed. Nar sent him a glare and wiped the sweat from his forehead. The cold chains felt wonderful. His eyes shot open. He looked to the chains and grabbed one of them before tearing it from its connection to his wrist. Then he felt a huge surge of energy, and spurred on by this burst, ran through the hand signs once more, slamming his right hand down on the ground. Kukyo's no jutsu, he shouted, as the area was covered by smoke. Jiraiya stood and got ready to fight should the summon prove hostile. Nar struggled to remain standing as his energy was drained. By the time it stopped, he had only enough to move and function. Who has summoned me? A voice called from the smoke. As it cleared, they saw what had been summoned. It looked to be a wolf with a black pelt that bore blood-red symbols. It stood at about 5 feet at the shoulder, and that meant it was easier for you to see its eyes. They were as red as a funeral pea and held the same amount of morbidity. Around its ankles were blood-red bands, each one bearing a demonic rune for wolf. Nar found his voice and was actually surprised he had lost it in the drain. I summoned you, Narid said before giving a bow with his hand over his heart, the palm facing outwards. It was a demon thing that blood hadn't gone into depth with, but he explained that it was a sign of respect for the other's honor and loyalty. My name is Naruto Namikaze, the vessel for the Lord of Hell. He gave me the contract to summon your kind, whatever you are. The wolf sighed and looked towards the rising moon. There was a pregnant pause before he spoke. So, blood has awoken. Yes, he gave you our contract for a reason. You are nowhere near strong enough to summon our alpha. But I speak for my father. You have potential, the kind of potential to lead the Hellhounds into glorious battle once more. Normally, we would test you, but Blood himself vouches for you. Summon me whenever you need to, but if at all possible, try to only do it in fights. I shall spread the word amongst the other clans as well. So till next we meet, young one. He bowed his head, and to his left, a fiery portal opened up. He began walking to it, but stopped right before it. He turned his head to Nar. Nar, my name is Bloodgarm. It helps in specific summonings to know the name, said Bloodgarm as he walked through the portal. Narid nodded and looked to Jiraiya, who was standing with his mouth hanging open, trying to catch some flies there. Gramps, close your mouth, Nar said, trying to figure out if he had enough energy to make it home. Jiraiya closed his mouth and glared at Nar. Would it kill you to show a little respect? And if you knew how long people have been searching for the Hellhound contract, you'd be a little more appreciative of the magnitude of this moment, Jiraiya replied, having trouble restraining himself. NAR didn't respond. He merely watched as the chain he broke reattached itself to his wrist, looking as though it had never been broken. So, that's how it works, Naruto thought, making a note of how much power he got. At the same time, he knew he could only handle so much energy, so he decided to limit himself to one chain, possibly two if he was in danger. His mental clock told him it was about 9 o'clock, and he had a team meeting the next day. He would need a lot of sleep to be able to function. The next day, "Yo, Erosan, I have a team meeting tomorrow. I'm going home." He turned to leave, but paused a moment. "If I catch you peeking again, I will open a portal to hell and personally kick you into it." Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. They both knew he was stronger, but Naruto had sneaked up him earlier. He simply decided to keep his guard up just in case. He cast a glance at the retreating form of the hybrid boy, pitying the boy's teacher. Kakashi was a Junin, but he was lazy and would underestimate NAR. Looking towards the hot springs, he sighed. He didn't feel like peeking again tonight, so he strode off into town, heading for the pub. The next day, the bridge where Team 7 meets. Sasuke stood glaring at nothing in particular. Sakura was standing opposite of him with hearts in her eyes as she looked at him, and Kakashi was trying to figure out where Naruto was. At first, he thought NAR might have gotten bored and gone home. After all, he was only 3 hours late. But Sasuke said that he got there first and NAR had never shown up. He would have normally left it alone. But NAR was the reason he had called the meeting. During the preliminaries, he was impressed by the new NAR. But the moves he used couldn't be copied by the Sharingan as he found out. So instead of copying them and teaching them to Sasuke, he would simply order Naruto to teach him. But in order to do that, he had to find him first. "Okay, let's look around some of the other training grounds first," said Kakashi, taking out his book, also known as portable porn. Sasuke, H&D, and Sakura nodded, following Sasuke like he was some kind of god. To their credit, they actually put some effort into searching, looking all over the village. They asked around, but even the Hokage didn't know where the hybrid boy was. Defeated, they returned to their own training ground only to find something that irked them scratched that pissed them off to no end. NAR sat atop one of the training logs, reading a small book. He didn't even remotely notice them. He just flipped a page in the book. Kakashi, deciding to relieve a little anger and scare the boy, threw a shuriken at Naruto, intending for it to graze his cheek. He didn't intend for Naruto to pluck it out of the air and throw it back with enough speed that it sliced through Kakashi's porn before he could move it out of the way. Kakashi looked at the torn book in disbelief, trying to deny the book's destruction. But he only succeeded in falling to the ground in tears. "Get up, Hitaki! You're embarrassing me," NAR said as he got off of the log. The other three looked at him oddly. He had never called Kakashi that before. Said John and got up and looked at NAR with an uneasy gaze. "Sakura," Kakashi said, getting the pink girl's attention. "You can go home now. I just need to talk with Naruto and Sasuke about something." Sakura nodded and walked off, following orders like a good soldier, or as some would put it, a weak-minded fool who didn't know how to think on her own. NAR, however, narrowed his eyes, already not liking this. After Sakura was gone, Kakashi turned back to NAR with an icy glare. He was met with a fiery one. "NAR, after witnessing your techniques in the preliminaries, I have decided that in order to be better equipped to defeat his opponent, you must teach your moves to Sasuke." "That's an order," Kakashi said, expecting the little bit of killing intent he was releasing while he was talking to be enough to convince NAR to agree. "Hitaki," NAR said, glare still in place. "What?" he asked. NAR flipped him off before continuing. Go __ yourself, he said with a small frown adorning his face. A sign that didn't bode well for Kakashi. Jiraiya looked at the scene from the bushes, watching the events with a bucket of popcorn and a soda. Kakashi was too stunned to say anything, and Sasuke was no different. Naruto let it sink in before continuing further. You preach teamwork like it's a holy scripture, yet the way you act like you only have one student is the equivalent of using that scripture to wipe your ass. I sacrificed something I'm not getting back for this power, and the deal was only open to me. Kakashi managed to recover in time to comment. Before he went on though. Shut up, Naruto. You don't know what you're talking about. Naruto simply flipped him off once more, but took his other index finger and made it circle his middle finger. Sit and spin, Hitaki. I gave up my humanity for this. I'm not human anymore. I said that at the meeting, remember? Or were you too busy reading that gay porn you carry around? I bet the only reason Guy is your rival is so you can see him move around in that spandex suit. Naruto mused, trying to provoke the Jonin. Back to topic. The techniques I use are forbidden for human use. So once again, __ you. If you want me to teach the emo bastard, then make me. Kakashi's eyebrow rose significantly. A Jinon telling a Jonin to make him do something. Apparently you lost your sanity too. I'm a Jun. Do you really think you can take me? Kakashi asked, trying to call Naruto's bluff. It would have worked a lot better if Naruto was bluffing. Kakashi might have been a Jonin, but NAR was fully rested and Kakashi was lazy, predictable, and weak from years of inactivity other than reading that porn. And if things got bad, Naruto could pop a chain off and summon Bloodgarm for help. Not only do I plan to take you, but I also plan to send you head first into the ground and leave you there. Naruto replied, his vorpal sword materializing in his right hand. NAR charged, sword in position to take full advantage of the momentum. Kakashi dodged the swing easily, but he knew that was it. Not after watching him fight the other day. He was right. NAR let the swing take him full circle, but this time Kakashi had an elbow heading straight for his face. He was surprised by the speed of the attack, but leaned out of the way. What he missed was the vorpal sword that tore a nasty gash across his chest. As he jumped back, swearing out of reflex, he realized his folly. NAR had switched hands during the spin, taking the Jun by surprise. Is that it? You're quite the liar, Naruto. I don't seem to be face down in the dirt. He taunted using a time-tested strategy. Angry opponents are less effective. What he didn't realize was that although insulting a demon's, dragon's, or archon's honor was an effective way of pissing them off, they only got better at fighting as their rage increased. Naruto's eyes turned a violent crimson, and the flames that covered the sword started burning hotter. Blood smirked from the depths of Naruto's mind as he dipped into his berserker state again. Dodge this, Naruto said, pulling his arm back. Kakashi's eyes widened as he threw the flaming sword at him at blinding speed. By sheer luck, he managed to sidestep in time, but Naruto hadn't been referring to the sword being dodged. The Jun's vision went dark as the hybrid's knee smashed into his face. Kakashi flew back as Naruto landed, rage fading. As Hitaki hit the dirt, NAR gave a feral grin, his sword disappearing from its spot in the earth. He walked off, the grin never leaving his face. When he was gone, Sasuke let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. His dope teammate had just kicked the __ out of their sensei. He hadn't been so scared since the Uchiha massacre. He looked over to Kakashi and ran over to him, hefting him up to his back so he could get him to the hospital. 1 hour later, from atop the Hokage mountain, a pair of amethyst eyes gazed over the village. Naruto wasn't grinning anymore, but one could tell he was amused. The merger had changed his eye color to amethyst after the fight, a color he seemed to enjoy. He was thinking about putting some crystals into the meditation room, as the color of amethyst seemed to soothe him. "Why not?" he said, out loud. He didn't turn as Jiraiya walked up beside him from behind him. "Why not what?" he asked, looking over. "The village like Naruto." "Just thinking about crystals. I'm thinking about some amethyst for my house in general." Jiraiya cast him an odd glance, but shrugged him off. They might not have known each other long, but he knew enough to know not to press. It probably wasn't important anyway. He's going to remove you from his team, you know? Oh, well, it was worth it. Did you see his face at the end? Priceless. Naruto started grinning again. Jiraiya looked to him and cocked an eyebrow. "You knew I was watching?" "Yeah. When I went into berserker mode, I was able to sense everything within 50 yards. You were in the bushes laughing as he got pummeled. Well, then you find yourself teamless yet studying under a Sani Ein." "What would you call that?" Naruto gave a short laugh. "Is that an offer of apprenticeship I hear? I think you might be going soft there." Jiraiya just laughed in return and began walking off. "So what time do you want me to meet you for training, Jiraiya-sensei?" Jiraiya turned and smirked. He knew Naruto would take the apprenticeship, so he already had a schedule worked up for him. Same spot as the other day. Show up at noon. We'll mainly be trying to figure out how to convert jutsu into techniques you can use and fine-tuning what you already know. Other than that, we'll take it easy. You don't want to have a bad injury during the finals." Nar nodded and turned back to the village. "Well then, see you tomorrow, Jiraiya." The old hermit smiled and walked off. The young boy had reminded him of Minato. He figured a night of drinking couldn't hurt. Walking off towards the pub again, Nar looked out over the village, his amethyst eyes gazing over the vastness of it until they were set upon the arena. A feral grin appeared on his face as he stared at it. In his mind, he was going over as many strategies as possible, and all he knew of Ninja Hyuga. "You shall lose Niji Hyuga, for you face hell itself." Sunlight poured into Naruto's bedroom from the window, causing him to roll over in order to escape the light that willed him to wake. He laid there for a half hour, trying to fall asleep once more, but to no avail. "Damn ball of fire," he mumbled as he arose, stretching to remove the stiffness of sleep from his body. He yawned, his sharp teeth visible to the world for a moment before they were hidden again. Jiraiya had joked that if all else failed, he could bite a chunk out of Niji. Naruto had replied that he would probably do it for kicks anyway. He moved in front of the full body mirror in his room and looked over his new form, not having a chance to prior. He was muscled now, but not grossly so. It looked like it balanced speed with power, though he knew that there was more strength to him than what first met the eye. He looked to his spiky red hair, noting that it was long and would get in the way unless bound. He decided to try tying it back like he had seen in a book once. He traced the metal that was bound to his shoulder, marveling at how he could actually feel his touch on the metal and how it was bound to him perfectly. The chains made no noise unless he wanted them to, which he found relieving. A clinking ninja is a dead one. He opened his mouth and looked at his teeth. All of them seemed sharper now. He shrugged and scratched the back of his head, freezing when he felt two small horns, no more than an inch in length, coming from the back of his head. His eye twitched slightly, but it was better that the single horn his inner dragon had. He had a bad feeling. It would have led to many unicorn jokes. A knock came from the door as he turned towards his bathroom. Groaning, he went to the door and opened it, his eyes widening when he saw Kin standing there, or more specifically what she was wearing. It was basically a French-made outfit, only a bit more revealing, while still remaining respectable. Over the last few days, the two had become a lot closer. After Kin was settled in, she really took to the role of being the maid. One night, after Naruto finished cooking, they just started talking and their friendship took off. Now they joked around quite a bit and eventually found themselves in a few awkward situations. Still, they were only awkward because of the confusing feelings that were beginning to arise in the two of them. Jean had come to tell him that Jiraiya had arrived and was waiting in the living room, but she was too entranced by her master's practically naked form. The only thing preventing him from being considered naked were the sleep shorts he had on, and Jean was trying to restrain her mind before it wandered. Naruto-sama, she started struggling to keep a straight voice. NAR snapped out of his gaze and looked at her face instead of the objects of interest below it. Jiraiya-sama arrived 10 minutes ago and is waiting for you in the living room. NAR sighed and looked back in his room, or more specifically the clock on the wall that told him that it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He wasn't happy he had slept that long, but he had blown a lot of energy the day before. Well, tell him I'll be there after I shower. He almost turned away, but stopped himself and said one last thing to Kin. If he does anything pervy, tell me, and I'll castrate him with my blade. She nodded and walked off, making sure to swing her hips a little for her master. It had its intended effect, as when NAR turned, he ran into the door frame. He uttered a few swears and went to take his shower. As she walked away, she congratulated herself. She had always been one to decide things quickly, and she had decided that she wanted NAR. At first, she thought it was just the seal, but now she was starting to see what a nice guy he was, and a relationship didn't seem too bad. Jiraiya sat in the living room looking around at some of the paintings when Kin walked back in. He had to force back so many comments and thoughts that it gave him a headache, but he figured it was better than having NAR taking swings at him with that sword. He might be a Sannin, but everyone got a lucky hit now and then, and where Naruto would be aiming. He didn't want to take the chance. About 15 minutes later, Naruto entered the room, his hair pulled back into a high ponytail that spiked in every direction with long spikes. 2 bangs fell on either side of his face, covering his eyes slightly, kind of like attaches. He sat down opposite of Jiraiya, yawning in the process. Sorry for sleeping in. The fight with Kakashi must have taken more out of me than expected, Naruto said, genuinely sorry for not showing up. Jiraiya just nodded in acceptance. In all honesty, I expected you to sleep in. Not many Genin can defeat their John and Sensei without some repercussions. Oh, and he did request for you to be removed from his team, which the council approved. You should have seen their faces when I said you were my apprentice. He smiled and wished he had brought a camera to the event. Naruto gave a small laugh and looked out the window. I do have a question for your new partner, though. NAR cocked an eyebrow. He would have asked how he knew blood was bound to him, but remembered Sarut. He nodded and seemed to zone out for a mere moment before returning to the land of the living. What do you want? Blood asked, stepping from the shadows. Jiraiya looked at the old entity, unfazed by his entrance this time around. I have a question for you. Do you know how humans use chakra to use jutsu and such? Jiraiya asked. Blood blinked a few times. He had expected a harder question. I understand the gist of it, but as I do not have any, I do not know the finer points. Why do you ask? I understand that his new energies are more wild than human chakra, but could they be used in the same manner? Could take years for him to use jutsu, but I may be able to help with his control of it. It would take more work, but the normal chakra exercises could be used. For this, Blood's eye closed while Naruto's widened. Perhaps, yes, it will work, but only for his demonic and archonic energies. Dragons are wild, and their power mimics that perfectly. Blood turned and began walking out, but was stopped by NAR. But if I can't practice with it, then how am I to get better at controlling it? He asked, a confused look upon his face. Blood chuckled, but didn't turn. It is difficult to explain, so if you don't understand. Oh well, you don't control your dragon power. You feel it. It is not based on control. That should be enough for you to understand, Blood said as he melted into the shadows. NAR stood there trying to understand. Fella don't seek to control it, but if he didn't control it, then it would be wasted energy, nothing more. He sighed and turned to the toad sage, but he shrugged. In truth, Jeria understood what he meant. It was one of those feel the energy and flow with it things. Shall we try it then? Jeria asked, motioning to one of the trees outside the window. NAR groaned. This was going to lead to some splinters and bruises. 5 hours later, Nerid stared at the tree in defiance. It was torn up from the small explosions that happened when his control slipped. He had made it up the 40-foot tree, but he was told to do it. Again and again he tried. Demonic energy flowed incredibly like chakra, but it was completely wild and volatile, leaving burns on the tree as well. It wasn't easy, but his control improved. He was now capable of storing up demonic energy and releasing it in a burst around him. It wasn't a big improvement, and the move had limited use, but it was enough. NAR reached the top of the tree once more, taking a breath before trying something Blood had told him about. It was definitely a control exercise. You had to create a barrier of energy on the bottom of your feet like normal, but you also had to make a separate barrier right under them. The effect was something akin to sliding on ice. As Naruto soon found out, he wasn't prepared to shoot down the tree like he was snowboarding, but he kept the two barriers up as he went down. The one on the surface was the harder one to keep up. It had to move ahead of him and dissipate right behind him. He managed not to do a face plant at the bottom, but the waves of exhaustion hit him like a drunken rhino and had roughly the same effect because his ass was out cold. Jeria stood on the sidelines smiling. The boy showed more potential than his father. He had the will to work, the determination to get it right, and the drive to do it as well. He picked him up and took him back inside, laying him on the couch. Hey, Ken-san, he called into the house. She came out of the kitchen, her maid outfit replaced with lounging clothes with an apron over them. She looked at Jeria before looking at the couch. Her eyes widened and she ran to her master's side. Narasama, are you all right? She asked, worried. Jeria put a hand on her shoulder, causing her to look at him. Take good care of him. He's going to need all the help he can get. He's a good kid no matter what he is. He's fine, just exhausted, and I think he's out of demonic energy. It was probably the shock that hit him. Just make sure he rests, and when he wakes up, tell him he has tomorrow off on the condition he relaxes. He smiled and turned towards the door. But Jeria-sama, why if he relaxes? Ken asked, confused. Jeria turned his head and answered, because I'm not trying to kill him nor run him ragged. His match is far too close to experiment with his limits like that. Until his match is over and done with, I'll only be able to help him with his control exercises. Unfortunately, he seemed annoyed. He couldn't teach him more in the current time, but he knew there was nothing he could do. He gave Ken a nod and walked out the door, shutting it behind him. Jean looked to her ragged master and sighed, brushing some of his hair out of his face before kissing him lightly on the forehead. She smiled before standing up and returning to the kitchen, deciding to make dinner so that he could eat when he awoke. Nerid felt weightless as he drifted into his mind. He opened his eyes to find them staring at his inner dragon. The great beast blinked in acknowledgement before walking off into the distance. Naruto found peace as he saw the dragon following its whims like it was the best way to go through life. He looked to the sky and sighed before walking off to his oasis. He found the pool undisturbed and walked into the water, letting the coolness refresh him. He didn't understand it though. Although it was his mind, this water shouldn't be this refreshing. It soothed him as much as real water would, and then some. A splash resonated throughout the area as Naruto laid back in the water, floating while staring at the cloud-dotted sky. He saw his dragon flying around in the sky. And as he laid there, he decided that after the Tunin exams, he would learn to fly. His head jerked to the right when he heard a twig snap, but he relaxed when he saw his demon standing by the waters. I would recommend you focus your efforts on my powers and arcs. What you want will only come as instincts, he said, looking off into the distance. Nar raised an eyebrow. Arc, your archonic side. Surely, you didn't think you would be calling us demon, dragon, and archon. He seemed to be amused at the last part. Naruto looked back to the sky as his demon walked away. What's your name then? Zurich. And before you ask, no, I do not know the dragon's name. The newly dubbed Zurich said as he walked off. Naruto sighed and looked back to the sky, letting the calmness allow him to return to his body without effort. Normal world. Amethyst's eyes opened and looked around the room lazily. He knew where he was. He might have drifted back to sleep if it weren't for the wonderful smell coming from the kitchen. He got up, stretching to further wake himself up. Walking into the kitchen awarded him with the sight of Chin making chicken stir-fry, deciding to see what would happen when he did it. He moved up behind Chin and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on the top of her head. Her breath hitched, and he could practically feel her blush. He could tell she was trying to focus on the food. A smirk appeared on his face as he pressed himself to her back, knowing it was driving her crazy. So, what's cooking, Kin? He asked, already knowing. In truth, he wanted to see if she could speak properly. Stir-fry and Naruto-sama, she stuttered out. He released his hold of her and gave her a quick peck on the cheek. It smells wonderful. I'm going to take a shower before dinner, so there is no rush. When you're done, you may do whatever you wish, Naruto said, noticing that his voice was far more calm and smooth than normal, a fact he contributed to his shortage of demon energy. To preserve balance, his archonic energy had taken more influence over his body. Shrugging it off, he walked off towards the bathroom, hoping the hot water would cure his aching body. Chin stood still, frozen. As a female servant, she felt a physical need for her master. What he just did was almost like dangling meat in front of a hungry lion. She tried to focus on cooking, but every now and then, her mind would slip back to her master. He had said she could do as she wished after she was done, and what she was planning would require her to lock her door and put up the soundproofing just as she knew. 20 minutes later, Naruto was walking through the house towards the dining room. Taking his time, he was clad in baggy black pants and a white tank top, leisure clothes as he called them. He had found that when he concentrated, he could turn his fingernails into claws reminiscent of his dragon's. He had also found that these claws were sharp enough to leave deep gouges in his marble countertops with very little pressure. He walked into the dining room to find a covered tray in at the head of the table with a note attached. Naruto-sama, I finished dinner and decided to go to bed early. Jiraiya-sama said that you had to take tomorrow off, and since we need some more groceries and other things, I wanted to know if you wanted to go shopping with me tomorrow. Just tell me in the morning. Good night, Master Kin. The note had a chibi drawing of Chin giving the peace sign. NAR chuckled and set the note aside and lifted the tray's cover to find the most delicious-looking stir-fry he'd ever seen, or smelled for that matter. He wolfed it down without a second thought. Finding that it tasted as good as expected, he looked over to the stove to find some more of it waiting there for him. That settles it. That girl is the chef from now on, he said as he tore through the rest of it. He was going to sleep well tonight. The next day, Kanaha Shopping Center. They had left fairly early, if only to avoid the mass of idiots. They were saving the groceries for last, instead visiting the local ninja weapon store to restock on kunai, shuriken, and a few other things. The store itself was simple in design. There were weapons on the walls, storage scrolls on the counter, a list of prices on the wall next to the cash register, and a door leading off into the back room. The guy at the counter had stringy brown hair that hung over some of his old face. He looked to be in his 50s at the least, but he wore the clothes of a blacksmith that denoted that he wasn't going to let his age stop him. He turned his head to his two customers and smiled. "So what can I do for you?" he asked, his voice aged yet strong. Narrett motioned for Chin to look around while he placed his orders. "I need 50 kai and the same number of shuriken, 100 yards of ninja wire, and some exploding tags," Naruto said, putting a small pouch on the counter. The old man took it and emptied it into his head to find several gems that could probably buy his store a few time over. "Done. But this is far too much for those supplies. Unless, of course, you're putting in a special order for something?" he asked, a spark of hope igniting in his brown eyes. Narrett nodded and took a piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to the old man. Brown eyes widened as they looked over the designs, a whistle escaping his lips. "That explains the payment, but I'm afraid I don't have half of these things. If you agree to make it, I can arrange for more than enough of all the ore bars and gems to forge these." "Simple as that," NAR said as he looked over a few of the weapons in the store. The name's desk read, "And if you can provide the materials, then you'll have your weapons. When can I expect them?" he asked, pocketing the gems and designs. Naruto grinned. This had went better than expected. "Tonight at about midnight." "When can I expect my blades?" "Duh?" he asked in return. And in return, he got a smirk from the old smith. "1 week. That should give you a day or two to get used to them before the finals, right?" With a nod from Narrett, they both turned and walked off. Naruto with Ken out the door and desk read into the back of the shop. "So where did now Kim-chan?" Naruto asked, a bored tone in his voice. Chin blushed at the affectionate suffix, but she shrugged it off. "Well, we need a few groceries. Nothing much, though. Maybe a bag or two, actually," she responded. Narrett nodded in acknowledgement, but a thought struck him. "Do you have enough clothes?" "I don't think you have too many," he asked. The concern surprised her slightly, but she shook her head. "I have 2 sets of civilian clothes and 4 sets of ninja clothing and a sealing scroll along with a maid outfit. That's all I have really." She blushed slightly at mentioning the maid outfit in public, even if they were the only ones on the street. "Why do you have a maid outfit anyway?" Naruto asked, looking over to her with a raised eyebrow. The question had been irking him, but her statement had reminded him. Chin turned beet red and looked away, mumbling under her breath. "What?" She couldn't stand to face him while saying this, so she kept her face away, but managed to speak loud enough for him to hear. "I'm kind of into roleplay." "All right." To her surprise, Narrett burst out laughing. She looked over to find him grinning. "Sounds good to me, Kim-chan," he said, after a moment, adding a wink at the end. She blushed more and tried not to face him, but her mind did wander. After a few minutes off walking to the store, NR started sniffing the air like there was something very odd about it. "Hey, Kin, do you smell anything?" he asked. Quietly, she turned to him, blush gone, and shook her head. NAR shrugged and went on. "All right, I just thought I smelled something akin to honey and vanilla." "Oh well, probably just my imagination." He just put on his grin again and kept walking, not realizing that he had been smelling Kin's arousal. She, however, did, and the blush returned. "There's the store," Naruto said, pointing to a small building almost hidden between two smaller ones. The store itself was fairly simple and one of the smaller ones in the village, but it was easy to find and usually had what someone would need. As they entered, Naruto explained that the owner was one of the few that bore him no ill will, actually being the one to supply him with decent food when he was young. "Well, if it isn't NR, how you been, boy?" Kai asked. He was an elderly man that looked ancient. He was bald, but while covered in wrinkles, his face was sharp. He was actually taller than most, standing at 6 feet 3 inches. Naruto smiled back at the man and turned to Chin for a moment. "Kin-chan, could you please get what we need? It's been a while since Kai and I have been able to talk," he asked kindly. She smiled and nodded, turning and walking down one of the short aisles. NAR walked over to the counter, gave Kai a handshake. No one knew where he came from, but he had always preferred to shake instead of formal bowing. "So how you been? There's word going around that you made a pact with some unholy beast for power," Kai said with a knowing smile. Naruto laughed and shook his head. "Nah, I made a pact with the King of Hell. He gave the power to protect that which I care about, and he made a hybrid." Kai nodded and lit his pipe, taking a drag before responding. "Any human in there?" NAR shook his head, and Kai nodded and patted him on the shoulder. "Good. Stupid questions. Stupid problems, stupid answers, stupid race. True enough. How have you been?" "I'm 91. My joints hurt. Business has been slow, and I'm slowly losing the ability to wipe my own ass." "How are you?" Kai deadpanted. "I'm about to turn 17. I'm sore from training. My sensei is a pervert, and I'm retaining the ability to wipe my own ass." Naruto replied, getting a whack upside the head from the old shopkeep. "Why's S?" he muttered. "Who's the girl?" "Chin-chan." "She's a friend," he said, trying to avoid calling her anything. "But Chan, you sure she's just a friend?" he joked. "Watch it, Arrow." Gigi. They would have continued their odd conversation if Kin hadn't walked up with a few things they needed. Kai smiled and took the items from her, tallying the cost and bagging them in a large brown bag. "That'll be dash." "Here." Naruto cut him off and put a few of the gems on the counter. Kai's eyes widened and the pipe almost fell from his mouth. "Consider them a payment for helping me when I was a kid. Normally, this is where someone would say, 'Oh no, I can't accept this, but I ain't normal, am I?'" he said jokingly as he pocketed the gems. He handed the bag to Naruto, who took it and walked out the door with Chin beside him. As they exited, Kai couldn't help but chuckle. The two made quite a pair. Once they were outside and a fair distance from the shop, however, Chin turned to her master with a raised eyebrow and a silent question. "He's always been like that," was Naruto's only answer. Kin sighed and walked on. 10 minutes later found them back at the Namex Manor, unpacking the groceries. Upon finishing, Chin stared towards the couch, but NAR grabbed her arm in order to stop her. Answering her quizzical look, he motioned to her clothes, which only spurred another look. "I'm going to regret this, but I need to get some new clothes. Do you want to come with me?" "I quite frankly have enough to buy the store several times over, so go nuts. Kin was a girl, but she tried to maintain a tough exterior at times since she was a ninja. However, being told they could go on an unlimited shopping spree would break even some of the toughest barriers. Naruto was dragged out of the house by his arm. Curious how Kin moved fast enough to actually catch him unaware, she pulled him down the street, having seen the clothing store. On the way back to the house. On the way, they were given several dirty looks by the villagers that were starting to fill the streets. These looks were met by a demonic stare that would haunt them for the rest of their miserable lives. Luckily, they got to the store before Naruto could start mauling people, a thought that made Nar wonder how much fun mauling people could be. Before he went back outside to find out, Sheen pulled him further back into the store, depositing him at the men's department before running off to buy herself some clothes. "What have I done?" Naruto quietly asked himself as he looked around. He had ninja clothing down with Blood's ability to create new clothes from his energy. So, this was mainly just a chance to get leisure clothes. He got a few jeans, a couple cargo pants, and a few khaki shorts. With these, he got a large variety of t-shirts with various sayings, mainly to piss people off. On a whim, he got a striped white and blue bucket hat. After looking at it in a small mirror, he grabbed a few more. Walking to the changing rooms, he saw Sheen walk out of one in a black miniskirt and a white tank top. She was slightly surprised at the sight of her master, but she got over it. However, the slight smirk on Naruto's face worried her. "Naruto-sama, what are you smirking at?" she asked cautiously. "Mind doing a little spin for me?" he asked innocently. "Just kidding." Sheen blushed, but she did as she was asked, taking slight pleasure in the fact that she had her master's full attention. She went back into the booth and changed back, having already tried the other 20 outfits she picked. "Your turn, master," she said with a smile. Naruto blinked, but saw it as fair. He deposited all but a few things on a nearby counter and went in a booth. While he did this, Kin was trying to figure if she could peek on him while he changed and not get caught. "Happy now?" Nar said as he emerged. He stood in black cargo pants and white shoes. The t-shirts he got were in a variety of sizes, ranging from form-fitting to very baggy. And this one was a blue form-fitting one with the words "I bite" written in black. His red hair spilled out from under the bucket hat since he had to take it down to put the hat on. It cast a shadow over his eyes, making it seem you were looking at two amethysts in the shadows. "Do a little spin," Kin asked cutely. Naruto sighed and did a fast 360 on his heel, causing Sheen to send him a mock glare. "Fine, B. That way. I did it that fast so you wouldn't stare at my ass," Naruto said as he walked back in. Sheen's eyes widened and she tried to stammer out a response but failed. He exited in his normal attire, but the bucket hat remained. "Do you have everything you want?" "Yes, Naruto-sama," she responded, not looking at him out of slight shame. She jumped slightly when she felt Naruto's hand on her cheek. He gently made her look at him, smiling softly. "Lighten up, Kin. I don't really care that you stare at my ass," he said in a light tone. He took a step back and flexed jokingly. Besides, not many women could resist the alluring charm of a demon's body. That did it. Kin had to cover her mouth to stop herself from bursting out laughing. In truth, she liked the little pose he did, but the comedy of it overruled the arousal by far. Nar gathered up the clothes he had picked, and since she seemed to be incapable of carrying anything at the moment, some of the things that Sheen had picked he left a portion of it alone, mainly the bras and panties she had picked out of respect. Once she calmed down, she picked up what Nar hadn't with a slight blush and inclined her head to the counter. Nar nodded, trying not to look at the lacy underwear that she was trying to hide from his view. They walked over, setting the large pile of clothes on the counter. "Will that be all?" Akaino, looking brunette behind the counter, asked, ringing up the clothes. "Yes," Naruto said, pulling out a few more gems. In truth, he could have just put it on credit, but not many questioned.